So I'm gay, and I didn't come out until I was 25. And I spent from 11 to 25 hiding who I was. And a big part of it was that there were no mirrors. Nothing I read everything, and there were no queer characters. There were no men who loved men. I believed I was alone. This was my first big mistake. My older brother, 5.5 years older, is gay. We never talked about it. Our family was so homophobic. The culture was so homophobic. I thought I was alone. And I thought I was alone in history. I thought that there was never another person, another guy who liked other guys. In the whole history of the world, I was the first person on the planet. And then even in the gay community, we say, oh, Stonewall, that's when Pride began. In fact, it actually says that on the banner. That's the Stonewall Inn, 1969. But then you start digging a little deeper, right? In my 20s, as I was starting to figure it out. And I was like, Carl Maria Curtenberry came up with the word homosexual in 1869. That's 100 years earlier. Wait a minute, there were gay people back in 1869? And then in 2011, I went to like a gay men's summer camp weekend thing, and I went to a lecture, and this guy talked about these letters between Abraham Lincoln and Joshua Fry Speed, and he said that he believed that Abraham was in love with Joshua. And I was like, no way. That's a bridge too far. But I was like, I didn't believe it. I just thought that how could that be true? How could I be in my 30s and have never even heard of this? And then I was like, well, I'm going to go to the library. I'm going to get those letters out. And I read the letters, and I was completely flabbergasted because I'm convinced the letters, the way Lincoln talks about his emotions is exactly how I felt. And I was inspired, and I wrote two books. One was a novel, and the other was a nonfiction book about men who loved men and women who loved women and people who lived outside gender boundaries in history. Because here's the thing, we teach that history is this facade, that it's the stories of rich, white, straight, able-bodied, cisgendered men from Europe. But if we can break that facade, it's like the light shining through. I sold the nonfiction book to a Big Five publisher 5 years ago, and I believed that my book had value because I sold the book to a Big Five publisher. And I was like, yeah! And I worked for a year and a half with them. The book was finished. We were talking cover design. It was going to copy editing. And that was my biggest mistake. I believed my book had value because somebody else tapped me on the shoulder and said, okay, Lee, we're ready for what you have to say. 2 weeks after our current president was elected, I get a call that the publisher's canceling my book. This was the hardest moment in my career. My agent was like, don't worry, we're going to get it sold, but to somebody else. Waited, nothing. No one. Here's when I got wisdom. I didn't believe them. I believed that my book had value. I believed that my voice had value. I believed that both books should be out there in the world. And then something really crazy happened. I started working at IBPA. And I'm like, people publish their own books. What? This is crazy. And I thought, okay, well, part of my job is telling people that an independently published book, whether you're the author or a small company, and a book published from a major publisher should be indistinguishable. I can do this. I did a Kickstarter. I wanted to raise enough money to not just publish the book professionally, but to give away over 400 copies to LGBTQ and allied teens. It worked. We funded in 6 days. And by the end of 30 days, we had enough money to give away 810 copies. Now the twist. The agent turned out to be a crook. There was a huge article about it. She never submitted my book to any publishers, except for that one that bought it and then reneged. So I had published the book, this book published on October 2nd, but nobody had ever seen it. I self-published kind of inadvertently. It was like the universe was like, you're going to self-publish this book. And I was like, okay. But then the industry that I thought was sort of like stonewalling me, intentional pun, was actually not. I've gotten a lot of accolades for it. It was a Book Life Prize semifinalist, meaning it was Publishers Weekly, one of their top 5 independently published books of 2018. I was a PW Indie success story. It got reviews in a lot of trades, but the most amazing thing is what I've heard from readers. This thing, that it gave them hope. It helped them feel less alone. And that's the thing. It's not always about the numbers or the accolades. It's about reaching. I felt this sense of responsibility to get out there and let kids know, because I know if I had had a time machine, it would have changed my life to know this story about Abraham Lincoln and Joshua Fry Speed. And I leave you with this quote: be a lighthouse. Because lighthouses don't run all over an island looking for other ships to save. They just stand there and they shine. And I encourage you to shine too.